It is a beautiful Friday across Kansas City as we get it going on 95.7 FM KCMO, and we are at Back the Blue tour stop number 4, live from the Olathe Police Department. We are now nearly a year into these Back the Blue tours as we go around the metro and we talk to the men and women in blue who, of course, protect us every single day. We get to know them. We get to learn more about them. And we're on tour stop number 4 now. We kicked this thing off last year in Clay County. We then went to Gladstone. We were in Prairie Village in the fall, and now we are happy to be in Olathe. So we've got some great guests for you as we roll through the morning here on KCMO Talk Radio. But we will, of course, do a lot of our regularly scheduled programming and show content and everything else going on. But we are going to have some great guests. We'll kick it off at the bottom of the hour at 6:35 with the Chief of Police here in Olathe, Mike Butod. So as we continue to follow up on the chaos from last week outside of that Super Bowl parade, this is now the second individual involved with this shooting, allegedly, of course, who has a family member who has tried to start a GoFundMe. I kid you not. I'd say something else, but Mark's then got to hit the dump button at 6:06 in the morning, which I don't want him to do. The family of the second suspect charged with murder, Dominic Miller, 18 years old, who allegedly fired the gun that killed Lisa Lopez Galvin, has set up a GoFundMe. That's right. Yes. Now, we told you a couple of days ago about how Lindell Mays' family set up a GoFundMe that was shut down shortly thereafter. Well, Dominic Miller saw about $85 donated for his medical expenses in a since-deleted GoFundMe page started by his older sister, Haley Scott, according to the Daily Mail. Do we have no shame anymore as a culture? I mean, we literally just stick our hand out, even if you have a brother who is an alleged murderer from last week's Super Bowl parade. It's just stunning to me. I mean, this got picked up nationally. New York Post had it, Daily Mail. The page claimed, it has since been shut down, the page claimed that times would be tough for Dominic Miller after he was struck during the chaotic gunfight that ensued. So think about this. The sister of the man who is alleged to have pulled the trigger of the gun that killed a mother of 2 right here in Kansas City at the Chiefs Super Bowl parade puts up a GoFundMe, and she claims that times would be tough. Now, we don't have, by the way, any pictures of Dominic Miller. There is no mugshot that we are aware of because he has been in the hospital since last Wednesday. That's why we only have the mugshot of Lindell Mays at this point in time. And he may be in the hospital. He is. That's what we know about him right now. But for you as a family member to go out there and try to raise money for a brother in this case who is alleged to have killed a mother of 2 at this Super Bowl parade, this is as shameless as it possibly gets. Along with the GoFundMe page, Dominic Miller's mother allegedly started another fundraiser on Classful to help her visit him while he's in the hospital. The page on Classful, a crowdfunding site meant to help teachers, describes Miller as a Kansas City Chiefs victim, 18 years old, fighting for his life. The fundraiser has raised no money as of last night. And it says the mother needs help with a hotel, food, and transportation to get back and forth to the hospital, where Miller is reportedly fighting for his life. The fundraiser also includes images of Miller, who had yet to be pictured, sleeping in a hospital bed with a breathing apparatus attached to him. Miller's grandfather, Donald Trent, told the Daily Mail that his grandson was recovering from surgery after being shot in the abdomen. So, of course, the family's not talking, but they have gotten now worldwide attention in the wake of trying to fundraise off of their son's struggles in the hospital right now, when he is the one who is believed to have actually pulled the trigger of the weapon that killed Lisa Lopez Galvin. I mean, just when you think it can't get any more embarrassing and shameful for certain people, it really does. Now, we don't know much about Dominic Miller, by the way. Like, we haven't seen him. All we've now seen are these photos of him being in the hospital in a bed. So the Kansas City Star puts out this piece last night titled, "Who is Dominic Miller? Kansas City man accused of firing fatal shot at Chiefs rally shooting." And before they get into who this guy is, there's this big editor's note at the top of the article that even by the Kansas City Star's standards is just beyond pathetic. They write here in this editor's note, "A booking photo of Dominic Miller is not yet available. The Jackson County Prosecutor's Office said Wednesday morning that Miller is still at the hospital and had not yet been photographed. The Star has published booking photos for Lindell Mays, who was taken to the Jackson County Detention Center Tuesday night after being treated at a hospital." All right, so far so good, right? Here's the kicker. "We, at the Kansas City Star, took time to carefully consider whether to use booking mugs in the absence of other images of the adult suspects. The Star policy is to use booking mugs only in the highest profile of crimes." The Kansas City Star is more or less explaining why they felt the need to use a mugshot of somebody who is involved in a tragedy here in Kansas City that has gotten global attention. They are trying to explain themselves in some roundabout way, like, "Oh, this is why we ended up using this mugshot of this guy. We take this very seriously, and, we couldn't find any other photos of him." What do you want, photos from his freaking high school prom? Hey, who cares? I mean, the guy is in custody with the $1 million bond for allegedly being involved in this shooting down at the Super Bowl parade last week. And you're explaining away and quasi-apologizing in some weird roundabout way as to why you felt the need to use a mugshot in the absence of other images of the adult suspects, as if anybody cares. This whole thing, and it started, remember, about 4 years ago. It started in the wake of George Floyd, when suddenly media felt this need to not provide mugshots because it was somehow inherently racist to share a mugshot of an alleged suspect. And don't get me wrong, I understand sometimes people are wrongfully convicted. I get the gray area there and how that can impact somebody. But to apologize or quasi-apologize or explain yourself for using a mugshot in this case is the most quintessential Kansas City Star thing that they could possibly do. It's just so pathetic. You don't need to explain why you're using a mugshot of somebody who has been, not this individual per se, but has been part of the story that has been one of the biggest stories in the world for the last 9 days. And only they could put something like that at the start of this article. And then they go on to write about Dominic Miller, the 18-year-old who's facing 4 charges for crimes related to the shooting. He is one of the 2 adults who have been accused this week, along with Lindell Mays at Raytown, who's 23 years old. They are both the adults in custody. Now, these are separate from the 2 minors, who, of course, are also in custody in connection with the shooting. And they're facing charges related to firearms and resisting arrest. Now, the Star writes here, because they're juveniles charged in family court, much of the information about their cases are not publicly available, including their names. But you know as well as I do, this stuff leaks all the time to the media, and if certain people wanted it to leak, they would find a way to leak it. Trust me, I know, and many of you know how this works. We've seen this in other cases. If people involved who have access to certain information want it to leak, they can easily make it leak. And at this point, all we know right now about Dominic Miller, who we really have not seen anything from, is that he is allegedly the guy who pulled the gun that ultimately killed Lisa Lopez Galvin. But he is also fighting for his life right now in the ICU. 6:14 as we get it rolling here from the Olathe Police Department, Back the Blue tour stop number 4. It's great to be here on a Friday morning. We're going to have the Chief of Police in Olathe, Mike Butod, joining us at 6:35. In the meantime, the markets keep rolling, but is that really reason to jump for joy. I mean, it can be. Open your 401k today, you'll probably be happy. But what's going on here, and is there cause for concern around it? We'll get to that next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Well, the Dow hit a record yesterday. So if you happen to pop on and check out your 401k on this Friday morning, you're probably going to be pretty happy. And the biggest driver of that is NVIDIA, which ignited the global stock rally yesterday. NVIDIA added $277 billion in stock market value in a single day after they ended up beating expectations. So the markets are on fire right now. I mean, despite the fact that we have this issue between what you might want to call Wall Street and Main Street, and I know many people on Main Street have 401ks and you've got retirement accounts and all those different things, which are great. There still is, of course, far more pain when it comes to inflation from the last 3 years and everything else on Main Street that is not reflected in the markets. But you did see the Dow cross 39,000 yesterday, and it was really driven by a single stock. And you've seen these magnificent 7 stocks, as they're called. They're all tech behemoths that are really driving this market surge over the last year or so. Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, which is Facebook, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla. That's what's called now and coined the Magnificent Seven, and they're driving not just the markets in this country, but oftentimes they're propping up the markets around the world. And it's good, it's great. You know, I think it's a little dicey when you've got 7 companies propping up, the entire global market in some degree, but I'll let experts figure that part out. What I do know is that when you see the success of this company, NVIDIA, it's a wildly impressive success story. This guy, Jensen Huang, is in many ways the embodiment of the American dream. This guy worked at Denny's, and he came up with the idea of NVIDIA over a cup of coffee at Denny's where he was working. And now he's worth more than $60 billion. Are people going to tell you that American success story and that American dream, John? I don't think so. That is just fantastic when you see stories like that out there. So I'm sitting here and I'm watching this from afar, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, $230 billion they add in value in a single day, which is like adding another Disney or Wells Fargo in one single session. To put that into perspective, they have added a Disney in a single session. Now, why? Artificial intelligence. That's what's driven the markets in large part over the last year. Remember, 2022 was a bad year for the markets. That's when everything started to, I don't want to say crash, but it came back down to earth after the sugar rush of 2021, when we were all still living high on the hog, when the COVID stimulus money was still there and people were spending and rates were low and the whole thing. 2022 was not good, and 2023 was not projected to be good. But what happened? AI. And AI drove the markets in an enormous way. And AI is something that I'm not going to tell you I'm an expert on. I'm not. But I know that we're going to be sitting here in 5, 10, 15 years, and it's going to be part of our everyday lives. I use it a little bit, like this outlet called Grammarly I'll use. If I'm writing emails, writing stories, you put the story right into this Grammarly system, and it basically fixes all your issues in there. All your, spelling issues, your grammar issues, it does it, snap a finger, and it's done, which is pretty good. But it's going to become even bigger as a part of our lives in the years ahead. So Google is getting a lot of flack for its AI. Yesterday, Google paused its Gemini chatbot's image generation tool, which is artificial intelligence. Why? It was widely panned for creating diverse images that were not historically or factually accurate. What are some examples? They made Native Americans among the founding fathers. And, listen, it's been a while since I've been in a History 101 class, but I'm pretty confident Native Americans were not among the founding fathers. Female popes, which also have never existed. And black Vikings, which just doesn't make any sense. What else? George Washington. They made George Washington into a black man in this Google AI tool. None of this makes any sense. So here's now the fear. AI, no matter what tool you're talking about, has to be put together by human beings. Just like what we talk about with algorithms on social media. Ultimately, the algorithms are created by human beings. So it's not like it's just a machine doing it, because someone has to tell the machine what to do, what to create, and what to prioritize. And when you're talking about historical inaccuracies, like some of the things I just listed, well, all of a sudden we are entering a world of AI that could be great and could be very exciting and has the potential and will change the world. The question is it for better or for worse? Can be very positive for all of us. It can make our lives much more easier than they are today. But at what expense? And who are the individuals who are driving the ship when it comes to what they're putting into the back end of these AI tools? And now that Google's been basically called out for their absurdly woke and really unusable and factually inaccurate representations of American history and worldwide history for that matter, it makes you wonder what's next. Because if AI becomes this thing in our lives where we're just asking some machine in our house, like a Google Home or an Alexa, which you might be listening to this morning to hear this show, suddenly you say, okay, who was George Washington, or who were the founding fathers? And you're getting AI-generated answers that are just factually inaccurate because Google wants to seem properly woke and whatever else you want to call it. It's not even diverse, because diversity is positive. Diversity is a fact. Diversity is what makes this country great. But pushing history that is factually inaccurate is not great. That's just nonsense. And Google got caught with its pants down on this Gemini chatbot image generation tool. And now they've shut the whole thing down because of how much they were pushing factual inaccuracies on their own app. So this is where we're going to have to watch how exactly AI continues to become a part of our lives. And while it can be very positive, just like social media, you've got to sit back and you got to say to yourself, okay, at what cost? And are the people who are actually in charge of the AI in Silicon Valley pushing the right things? And I am in no way convinced that they are, after what we've seen from social media and big tech, by the way, over the last, 10 years now, or what we're seeing in the short term when it comes to some of these things. So it's worth watching closely. We'll be doing it here on KCMO Talk Radio. And this is why competition's the answer. But as these big tech companies, as the Magnificent Seven, continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful, it is going to be nearly impossible to compete. I'd rather have, a plethora of tech startups trying to compete against each other to generate AI that works for you and I. But let's be honest, who the heck is going to get out there right now and be able to legitimately compete with the NVIDIAs of the world, the Metas of the world, the Googles, the Amazons? I mean, that is a tall order. This story, it's terrible, it's tragic, but it is the perfect example of why we here at KCMO Talk Radio decided to launch this Back the Blue tour, where we go to area police departments every couple of months or so and tell the stories of the folks in our backyard, in our police departments, who are doing incredible work. And most of us don't know them. And it's just because of the horrible publicity, the way the media has in large part treated policing in this country over the last 3-4 years. And we want to make sure that narrative changes, and we're trying to do it one show at a time. And it's great to be here. We are at the Olathe Police Department this morning, off just really south of 135th Street. And, it's great to be down here as an Olathe resident. Mark is right around the corner from where Mark is at. So these are fun times here, and it's great to get to this side and this part of the metro as well. We've done Clay County. We've done Gladstone. We've done Prairie Village. We're in Olathe. And we're going to be back on the Missouri side for the next one, by the way. We'll tease that for you here as we roll through the morning. So this story, Malcolm Johnson. Malcolm Johnson, you may remember that name. He was shot by KCPD at a gas station on the east side in 2021. and he was killed. 31-year-old black man, March 25th of 2021, almost 3 years ago now. And you may recall, it wasn't obviously a George Floyd type situation. It wasn't close to it. But it did get a lot of attention locally, regionally, and then, it got some national attention as well, because it was still at a time when cops were the bad guys. We're kind of building out of that, thank goodness. But this was obviously, in the wake of 2020 and all that craziness. Now, if you don't remember the story of Malcolm Johnson, here's the story. He was under surveillance as a suspect in a shooting. He was cornered by 2 KCMO officers inside a BP gas station on Prospect. Johnson resisted arrest. A struggle unfolded. Malcolm Johnson then, as you may recall, had a gun on him, and he shot an officer. The officers then returned fire and killed Malcolm Johnson. That's the story. Those are the facts on this case. The family, amazingly, is filing a wrongful death case. Now, listen, you can file whatever you want. This is America. I think we got too many damn attorneys who are looking for, cases and things like this to do, but neither here nor there. Take a listen, and I just want to share with you how the Kansas City Star frames this, all right? So they write here, Johnson tried to get away and a struggle unfolded. This is in their article this morning. It's the lead story today on the Kansas City Star. Malcolm Johnson tried to get away and a struggle unfolded. That's what they write. You mean he resisted arrest and was sparring with law enforcement? But that's where you have to read between the lines on how media uses words to push a narrative without making it overly obvious. They write, Johnson tried to get away, a.k.a. resisted arrest against law enforcement while he was armed, and a struggle unfolded. More officers joined the fight, they write, which spilled into an aisle of the convenience store. Do you see how soft the tone is on this? They write then Malcolm Johnson appeared to be reaching, and one of the officers called out for someone to shoot him. They write here. They go on to note, and this is one of the officers speaking now, telling Highway Patrol investigators, as I moved up and away from Malcolm Johnson, his handgun did discharge and hit me in my right leg. So Malcolm Johnson has a handgun. It did discharge, and it hit an officer in his leg. The officer then continues, saying, being in fear for my life of already being shot and in fear for all their officers' lives with him and still in control of his handgun, I drew my handgun. I was able to get an angle into the top of his head that was facing away from my guys, and I discharged my handgun twice, and he was hit. He went motionless to the ground. That is the statement from one of the officers with KCPD in the Malcolm Johnson case from almost 3 years ago now. So you have an individual who resists arrest, gets into a struggle with law enforcement, fires his gun and hits an officer in the leg, and officers in that moment, with this individual still being armed, return fire. And the family in this case is suing. That's the kind of environment that we find ourselves in right now. That family members of people who shoot police first, remember, the cops did not open fire on Malcolm Johnson. Malcolm Johnson shot a cop. They returned fire because they're in this struggle with this individual. He's armed. He's already discharged his firearm. And there are lawyers who will take this case, who will pursue this, and there are cops now who may have their livelihoods on the line because of lawsuits like this. And I'm sure we're not far away from, an opinion piece in the Kansas City Star saying that, Malcolm Johnson's family has a case here in this wrongful death lawsuit that they have filed, which is patently absurd. I'm sorry, you resist arrest, you fight with police, and you discharge a weapon onto cops and shoot them. There's no case here. But this case was filed back on February 12th in Jackson County Circuit Court. I know there's gray areas in policing. I'm not here to say every cop's the greatest guy in the world. We've all had our, chops busted by a cop who's trying to be a tough guy. They're human beings too. But in cases like this, when it's this clear what has gone on here, that is just next level. To use a moment like this and to try to make money off a death of this kind when it's beyond evident based on the facts that this case should be thrown out immediately by any decent judge. 10 minutes away from hearing from a couple of guys who were down at the parade rally last Wednesday with the Olathe Police Department. Don't miss that. 10 minutes from now here on KCMO. Now, speaking of the Chiefs, they made a move yesterday that takes some stones, some cojones, whatever you want to call it. And I applaud this team, Andy Reid, all the way up to Clark Hunt, for getting somebody on their team who's not just talented, but who got royally screwed in this Me Too movement that has gone way too far. And I say that as a father of soon-to-be 3 daughters. The Me Too movement started off, like many movements do, with a just cause and a great purpose. And that was because for far too long, women who were abused, who were assaulted, were not being believed. And were even afraid to come forward. But like many movements that start off just and start off with good intentions, it gets corrupted by bad actors. And we got to a point where suddenly, if you were a female making an accusation, you were telling the truth, no matter what. And if you said, hey, I don't know about this one, the facts don't add up, you were called names. You were called, sexist, misogynist, whatever. So as unfortunately seems to happen, the pendulum swung too far in one direction. So that being said, here's what happened to a guy the Chiefs just signed yesterday. Former Buffalo Bills and San Diego State punter Matt Araiza. His nickname was the Punt God. He was drafted in the 2022 NFL Draft in the 6th round. Now, you got to understand, punters don't typically get drafted. You got to be a damn good punter to get picked in the NFL Draft. This guy was a unanimous All-American punter. And just as his career gets started with the Buffalo Bills in 2022, what happens? A woman accuses him of sexual assault during a party in 2021. Well, right away, the story stunk to high heaven. She was allegedly 17 at the time. This happened. There were other people around. It was part of a group situation. And the Buffalo Bills, despite the fact that the evidence was beyond spotty, they cut the guy. And he gets left off of NFL rosters. No one's going to pick him up. Well, what ends up happening? The accuser ends up, and this was late last year, dropping the case against Araiza with no monetary payout. Basically, Araiza is wrongfully accused, and he has his name cleared. Now, he's not pursuing defamation charges against the woman. He still can sue the woman's attorney, by the way. And apparently that is still very much on the table, as it should be. At some point, these attorneys who take these bogus cases, I think, should be held responsible in some degree. And I know, attorneys are going to be freaking out over that. I don't care. These attorneys that are such hucksters, they'll take anything to try to make a buck off somebody who's got some money in the bank is ridiculous. They're all a bunch of thugs. Oh, did I say thugs again this week about attorneys? Oh, how dare I. No, they are thugs and punks, all of them. Araiza got wrongfully convicted. He had his name dragged through the mud. And what happens, by the way? The accusation gets 10 times the attention of what ends up happening in the case. You get accused of something and you are viewed guilty. And then even if the whole thing is viewed as bogus, well, guess what? No one really remembers it. So from a legal and financial perspective, suing this woman doesn't make much sense anyway. She probably doesn't have a lot of money. retaining the right to sue her attorney makes much more sense. And apparently he may end up pursuing that option. So the Chiefs bring in Matt Araiza. And I'll tell you what, that is showing courage. That is showing a backbone from Clark Hunt on down. Because here is a guy who was wrongfully accused. The facts never backed any of this up. And the Buffalo Bills, and by the way, you know how we feel about the Buffalo Bills in this town anyway. The Buffalo Bills were such cowards, they just let him go. They took an accuser who had little to no facts at their word and tried to ruin this guy's career. So not that we needed another reason to root against the Buffalo Bills, but now we absolutely have one. And we'll be seeing the punk god hitting 82-yard bombs at Arrowhead next year, and I can't wait for that. Unfortunately, it probably means the end of the Tommy Townsend era, but, in this case, that's football. It is what it is. Beautiful morning in Olathe as we are live at the police department here in town for our Back the Blue Tour stop number 4, continuing in what has been a great series that we kicked off last year. 913-408-7957. How you join us this morning. Tammy's in Olathe. Tammy, good morning. You're on KCMO. What's happening?
Good morning, Pete. I just wanted to say thank you for doing this tour. And I was listening this morning as I drive and wanted to say thank you to the Olathe Bomb Squad. I was at the Union Station at the close of the rally, and I was with our son and our 2 granddaughters, ages 9 and 13. And they, when the shooting happened, they directed us. We were headed back underneath to catch our bus, and they directed us underneath, and people were panicked, and our granddaughters did a great job of staying calm, but we ended up taking shelter by an armored vehicle that was the Olathe Bomb Squad, and I just wanted to say thank you to that team. They were awesome, and it was a real comfort to have that protection.
Tammy, I love hearing that. Thank you for sharing it on the air. And we appreciate your support here on KCMO. Thanks so much. Have an awesome weekend.
And you too. Thanks again, Pete.
You bet. That's great. There's a lot of area law enforcement folks. Obviously, KCPD led the way with several hundred officers, but the entire region sent folks down for the parade in what we thought was going to be just a celebratory day. And then, of course, one of the worst things imaginable ends up happening. And you get to see the men and women in blue around the region at their best during the worst. And that's what, unfortunately, last week turned into. And this tour stop in Olathe for Back the Blue had been on the schedule for weeks, but obviously I knew in the wake of last week they would have folks who would be able to share some of their stories. And that's, of course, what we're hearing in part here on KCMO Talk Radio on a Friday. Now, speaking of sports in this town, the outrage, and we talked about this yesterday, from the Kansas City Current's 9,500 season ticket holders is continuing after we find out this week that parking for the Kansas City Current, the professional women's soccer team that starts its season here in the next few weeks and has its new stadium on the riverfront, has limited parking, and the parking will cost you, I was saying $50 yesterday, and that is what the base level is going to be. But when you factor in taxes and fees, you're looking at $68 freaking dollars to park at a women's soccer game. Now, some of you are going to get offended when I say to park at a women's soccer game. I'm not saying that to be offensive. I'm just saying it's not the NFL. The Chiefs don't charge $68 to park at a game. And that's the most popular sport in America with back-to-back Super Bowl champs and the face of the NFL at quarterback. And they're not charging $68 to park at a game. So don't take the, it's not about women's soccer. This would be ridiculous for the Kansas City Royals. But here's the thing. According to city records, writes the Star, The development plan for the 11,500-seat stadium required the Currents to provide only 2,000 parking spaces.
Oh, that's good math. Even I know that, a communications major from the Midwest Liberal Arts College.
You got to partner with 6 of your best friends to make that work, by the way.
Boy.
That was with the understanding more public parking would be built to the west of Berkeley Riverfront Park. But even those garages and existing free public parking in the area will never be enough that everyone attending a match will be able to park close by. The presumption from the beginning was that many fans would arrive by public bus. Just what we all want to do in this town. Get on the free bus. You got a couple of homeless guys shaking you down, and, hopefully you don't get peed on while you're there. Are you kidding me? Shuttle buses from remote parking locations. Yeah, just shuttle buses from remote parking locations to watch a soccer game. With all due respect, how many of you are going to do that? I say this as someone who has been fortunate to be at a lot of Chiefs games in recent years. And if I had to shuttle from a separate lot to a game, I would go to fewer Chiefs games. If I had to take a shuttle bus, drive to a parking lot, and take a shuttle bus to go to a game, I would go to fewer games for the back-to-back Super Bowl champs. Also, rideshare services. Because I'm sure that surge prices, which are going to be astronomical when thousands of people are trying to get out of a soccer game, that's going to be really economical. And then they also say here, the other part of the presumption in a 64-page traffic study from last May was they expected that fans would use public bus, shuttle buses from remote parking locations, rideshare services, and bicycles and their feet.
That's what I wondered, how many racks were there yesterday when we were talking about that. Here's the thing from observance. The Chiefs used to have Stadium Express. You could park at Ward Parkway Shopping Center, Antioch Mall up north, at one of the malls, and you would ride the bus in, right? It seemed convenient, but I think that's discontinued through lack of riders.
Yeah. Well, never mind when you're trying to promote a sport that is, kind of popular, but still has a long way to go in popularity. Whoever put together this plan is an absolute imbecile. You need to basically make it as easy as possible for people to come watch your team. You don't have enough parking, and you're hoping they're going to walk or bike. And by the way, I'm going to take my daughters to a game. They're little girls. They'd love to go. But I'll tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not circling River Market for 20 minutes and then walking a mile with a 5-year-old and a soon-to-be 3-year-old to watch a soccer game. I'm not doing that for the Chiefs. I'm not doing it for the KC Current. They've got a major problem on their hands here. And it's too bad, but they got to figure it out, and they got to figure it out fast. All right, let me just quickly, if I may, respond to some of these texts here. All right, as we roll through a great show in Olathe at the police department. Pete, mental health professionals going with cops might as well rename you Woke KCMO. It will only take one of these morons to get killed by some psycho before they reach the conclusion this is stupid. That is from David in Kansas City. David, there is one thing stupid about this, and that is that comment. With all due respect, this is, frankly, in a perfect world, if you have the resources, what you would want. We're not talking about sending out mental health professionals who are unarmed by themselves, right? We're talking about them working in conjunction with an armed cop to potentially help somebody who is suffering from a mental crisis. Now, cops are obviously experts in this as well. Many of them are trained, not all, but many of them are trained in CIT, crisis intervention training. Not all, but many. But, ask any cop, I guarantee you, he or she would say, sure, if I'm going to a mental health call, I'd love a mental health expert to be alongside of me. Nothing woke about that. That's if you have the resources, that sounds like a great opportunity for anybody. There is nothing woke about that whatsoever. You completely miss the point of the conversation if you think that's, the outcome here on this. This is actually how you want it to go. What the wokesters want is they don't want any cops. They just want unarmed mental health professionals walking around and, making everyone sing Kumbaya. That's what they want. What they're talking about and what they're doing here in Olathe is very different. You're talking about armed cops, during 8 a.m. to midnight on mental health calls, having one of these professionals effectively with them. And that is a completely different situation from what you're implying there on the text line. So that's why I love hearing these stories from our area law enforcement folks. Now, Wall Street Journal headline. The National Labor Relations Board this week, this is crazy, ordered Home Depot to rehire a man with back pay after the store sidelined him for breaking its dress code in 2021. Antonio Morales had written BLM for Black Lives Matter on his work apron in tribute to the movement. The company is like, nope, that's against our policy. You cannot display causes or political messages unrelated to workplace matters. Well, in a 3-1 decision, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that Mr. Morales' actions are protected by labor law, which lets employees organize on the job. The 1935 National Labor Relations Act guarantees that workers can take public positions on workplace conditions or joining a union, whether or not their bosses want it. This is insane. If you are looking forward to walking into a Home Depot, walking into a Lowe's, walking into a Dunkin' Donuts, going to, your area McDonald's, and having some guy tell you how Bernie bros are the way of the future, and also on top of that, talking about how, Trump is the only answer and God's gift to America. Whatever side of the aisle you're on, this blows. I don't want to see politics. I'm not going to Home Depot. I'm not going to get my morning coffee. I'm not going to get my, quick trip hot dog to see the checkout person tell me what they think about the political environment we find ourselves in right now. So if you are someone who unfortunately is fed up with politics being in every corner of your life, and I say this as someone who is as well, even though that's a large part of what we sometimes do here on KCMO, get ready to deal with them on your weekend shopping trips, courtesy of the National Labor Relations Board. Just a horrible ruling, because now companies have no control. This guy, Antonio Morales, was working at Home Depot, and he wrote BLM on his apron, and also he was hanging BLM posters around the Home Depot he was working in. And the company's like, no, you are here to tell people where to find hammers and where to buy paint and, how to fix up their homes. You're not here to promote Black Lives Matter or MAGA or anything else. You do that on your own time. But this has opened up a complete can of worms for companies all over the country. And it is a ruling this week that is not getting nearly enough attention. I will put this up on my personal social media accounts so you can read the story there. But by this new standard, workers almost anywhere could adorn themselves in political slogans. So you're going to go to McDonald's, John, and you're going to get that nasty filet of fish you love here on a Friday.
Well, we may trigger some folks who go to Hobby Lobby.
Well, yeah, true.
Right?
Chick-fil-A.
We'll put it on the other foot, Hobby Lobby, Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, that's possible. Your McDonald's fry cook could be swapping his apron for an NRA shirt, I mean, I don't know, but this is the kind of stuff that I just can't stand it, because if you own a company or you oversee employees, you're basically now toothless. You do not have the ability to make sure your company and your employees are focused on one thing only, and that is making sure the company they work for is successful and gets as many customers as possible. I'll tell you right now, if I walk into Home Depot and I got 7 guys with BLM shirts on, I'm turning around. That hurts Home Depot. I'm going right to Lowe's. And now you're basically telling companies you have to take a financial hit so your employees can have freedom of expression. And that is just completely ridiculous.